bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Good evening, everyone. This is Andy Steele, your host. Thank you again for tuning in. Tonight, the guest is Cheryl Curtis. Her show is 9/11 Wake Up Call. It's a great show. She's interviewed some wonderful people on that program. It broadcasts out of Connecticut. Well, she'll be talking tonight about her program and just her activism overall. She was with me at the 9/11 Memorial this past week, handing out flyers, and then, of course, Richard Gage spoke there on Saturday, not at the memorial, but at a church somewhere else in New York City. But a whole week of activity, getting the word out, spreading the truth about what really happened to the 3 buildings in New York over a decade ago, and of course our whole world is still affected by this event. So this is why the people going to that memorial need to see this critical information. So she's a dedicated activist. Stay tuned. You're going to want to hear this one. You're going to want to listen to her show. Again, it's 9/11 Wake Up Call. You'll be hearing more about that later. So here I am. I am back. I spent a day in New York City participating in the activities I was just describing, handing out flyers to the people that were going to the memorial there. Of course, if anyone's been following these activities through AE 9/11 Truth's action alerts, or their bulletins that they send out through the email, or watching CNN, which we'll be getting to in a minute, and their coverage of this outreach effort, then you'll know kind of what this is about. Flyers were being handed out that are very similar to the flyers that, or rather the pamphlets, I should say, pamphlets very similar to the pamphlets that were being handed out at the 9/11 Memorial. Except when people took the pamphlets that were created by AE 9/11 Truth, they opened them up and they saw information related to Building 7 and the Twin Towers, the controlled demolition of those towers, and just an overall summary of the evidence, telling them to go to AE 9/11 Truth for more information, and then there's a Rethink 9/11 ad on the back of it. And this was a very brilliant strategy. Nobody lied to anyone, contrary to how CNN wants to frame it. No one lied to anyone about what was in the information, simply handed it out, said free information about 9/11, and people took it. And I know, just from watching everybody as they took it, and then taking a walk around the memorial later, a lot of people's eyes were opened. People looked upon these pamphlets and read the information very seriously. A lot of interest in this topic. And again, and I say this later in the interview talking with Cheryl, but I'll kind of shine a light on it now. What I find is that when you just talk to people about the evidence, about the science, and just stress the need for a new investigation into what really happened in the buildings, they're going to be more open-minded into supporting it. And that's really all you need from them. That's really as far as you need to go, because that opens the door. And then once we get a real investigation, once we can get any kind of official body to acknowledge that explosives had to have brought these buildings down, that opens the path for a wider investigation into the who and what and where and why 9/11 happened. So this is the first step, and that's really all you need the public on your side for, is looking into this evidence. And I talked to firefighters when I was down there. There was a fire station near there, or some kind of gathering place for firefighters. I don't even know if it was a fire station, but it was somewhere where a lot of firefighters were hanging out. And I got them to look at the pamphlet, and they agree that it should be investigated, the ones I talked to. Again, once you get people to wake up to the impossibility of the government's official story, then their eyes are open. Even if they don't want to believe it was a government false flag, if they don't want to believe that there was any more to the perpetrators than what we were told, that's not AE 9/11 Truth's mission. AE 9/11 Truth's mission simply is to get people to look at the forensic evidence about the destruction of the 3 buildings in New York. And what was funny too is I got a chance to lecture an entire tour group that was coming by too. See, there was a mural, a sculpted mural. So it was sculpted into the side of the building in what looked like bronze of firefighters, rescue workers on 9/11. A whole image of that terrible day. And I was positioned near there handing out the pamphlets. An entire tour group came by me, and the leader of the tour group, who was working for the 9/11 Memorial, asked me, what aren't we being told about 9/11? Referring to something that was written on the front of it. And I explained. I gave a 2-minute lecture on Building 7, the free fall, about the molten metal at the Twin Towers, about the impossibility of the government's explanation. I just simply said, we're looking for a new investigation into what really brought down the buildings. And the entire group, and this was a big tour group, folks, was enthralled. They were excited to hear about it. They cleaned me out of all of the pamphlets I was holding at that moment. So that is a good sign. And again, if you approach people positively and you don't go rapid fire at them with all this other stuff about about things that they're not ready to accept, start going into greater conspiracy or whatever. If you just start off simple and you go with the science, they will be more open. And if you're positive, if you're your understanding of their position right now of not being awakened to this at this moment, then the more people are going to listen to you. And I'm learning this as I go along too. But I'm going to tell you, folks, I've been doing this for a long time, and what I say now is true. All right, I know this from experience. So please listen to me. Stay positive, stay friendly. Even if people are nasty to you, stay friendly and just get the information out, the science information. That's going to wake up more people and get us closer to our goal of society, the establishment, media, government, acknowledging what really happened on 9/11. So anyway, some quick news. I have not had a chance to speak to you in the last couple of weeks because our interviews have gone kind of long. This one's a little bit shorter today, so we have some time to go over some news. And I guess the big news is what I just covered a minute ago, the actions taking place at the memorial. Now, CNN is doing its thing in attacking AE 9/11 Truth. That's essentially why CNN exists, is to keep a lid on topics like this. And we have an article here written by Craig McKee. I love how this Craig McKee writes and thinks. He's got some of the best lines I've ever seen here in a blog post or any alternative news site. So I'm going to be going over some of it. But the title is CNN's Yellow Journalism Rating Hits All-Time High. And then under that, the subheadline says, as Jake Tapper's The Lead dips to new low with coverage, quote-unquote, of AE 9/11 Truth Museum brochure. So the culprit here is Jake Tapper. And it starts out, this article, it says, it looked just like an infomercial, but with a lot more frowning. And an example of Orwellian newspeak, the CNN show The Lead with Jake Tapper took on architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth over his decision to distribute information pamphlets outside the September 11th Memorial and Museum at Ground Zero in New York City. The pamphlets mimic the design of the official ones, but instead of the official story, they contain key scientific forensic evidence indicating that the 3 World Trade Center towers were brought down with explosives and incendiaries. Unlike the official version, the photo on the cover of the AE pamphlet shows the Twin Towers and Building 7. The Tapper Report is a hysterical compendium of all the empty slogans and anti-conspiracy theory talking points that make up the mainstream media's continuing attack on the 9/11 Truth movement. It didn't take more than a couple of seconds into the report to see how Tapper was going to play the story. He tells us that the conspiracy group AE 9/11 Truth plans to stand outside the museum and hand out fake museum pamphlets that look exactly like the real ones. The volunteers handing them out are described as so-called truthers, and the whole exercise is labeled an affront to victims' families. And of course, anybody who's been listening to the show, anybody who's been awake to this issue, and I'm diverging from the article now if you can't tell, but anyone who knows anything about this topic knows that this is ridiculous. All right, Mr. Tapper is a ridiculous person. He's not a journalist. He is there to push an idea into your head that questioning this is crazy. Okay, and if you actually watch this report, and I'm not going to play it for you here on my show, it's about 5 minutes long, and CNN has billions of dollars to sell its nonsense. They're not going to get any time on my show, but I'll put a link up on 9/11 Freefall for the listener to view if they want. I'm sure they've already seen it, most of you out there anyway. But they lay it on so thick and is so obvious. This writer, Craig McKee, is dead on when he says it looks just like an infomercial with a lot more frowning, because it is that phony. All right, these two people that they have during the segment, Mr. Tapper, the host, and then there's a woman from Slate magazine, her name escapes me at the moment, on there to essentially sell a product, and the product is the official story. All right, the official story is just another piece of the useless crap that infomercials sell you all the time, like the hair spray paint that people spray onto their scalps, or the electronic food dehydrator. Okay, that's all the official story is. And so because the official story is just a useless piece of crap that has not served our country and is just kind of sitting on the shelf, and it's a big waste of our taxpayer money and treasure and blood over the last decade and more, they need these phony propagandists to sell it to you in the same kind of infomercial fashion. I mean, that is exactly what it is. I mean, this first line captures it perfectly, and it is so sad to see CNN fall to such lows. And again, it's not because I care so much about CNN or the network. It's just these individuals, these human beings that have to bow to their corporate masters and make fools of themselves by putting on this very obvious show of propaganda. You know, and that's a word that gets batted around a lot in our movement. But I mean, that's essentially what it is. This is going to be played in the future in classrooms as a disgusting example of what America became during this period in time. And really the beginning of the end for the status quo. All right, this marks the desperation of the what we call the establishment, you know, the media and political empire that now runs America and tries to keep the science of what happened to the buildings in New York, to keep the science squelched and keep the official story as having any credibility in anyone's mind, because it doesn't anymore. You know, even people that don't want to think about this on a constant basis, like I do, or the volunteers at AE 9/11 Truth, or members of this audience do, they know that there's something fishy with 9/11. A lot of people do. All right, and you know it's funny, they talk about being disrespectful to the families, to the victims, blah blah blah. But it's not disrespectful. We've had victims' family members on. That's old attacks, old news. But I went to the memorial. Okay, I saw it. I walked around it, and it was a beautiful memorial. When you put aside the lies of 9/11, you put aside the fact that this was used and exploited to sell wars and loss of civil liberties, all that stuff. It's a beautiful memorial to the people that died, and all it did was recharge my batteries. All right, it made me realize why I'm in this mission. So, and then when you're standing around that memorial and looking at all these engraved names around the pools that are taking the place of the two towers, the Twin Towers, and you see people holding our pamphlets that we held up. I mean, everywhere I looked, I saw them looking at AE 9/11 Truth pamphlets. You know that you are doing a great job. I know that my reason for going to New York was valid, all right? That we needed to hand those out, that those people needed to be awakened, and a lot of them are. And that is what CNN is afraid of. That's why CNN is putting out these infomercial propaganda pieces. So, good job to Craig McKee for this article. Check it out at ae911truth.org. All right, before I play my interview with Cheryl Curtis, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. Start that right now. And that is 10 seconds.
Cheryl Curtis is a 9/11 Truth activist and the host of 9/11 Wake Up Call. She'll be talking more about that show today on this show. Welcome to 9/11 Free Phone, Cheryl.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Now, Cheryl, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, and how did you yourself wake up to the 9/11 crime, the true nature of it?
Okay, well, I've lived in Connecticut all my life, and I used to be a Spanish teacher in a high school. For the last 16 years, I coordinated the ESOL program, which is English to Speakers of Other Languages program, in the local school system here. And I also have a degree in marriage and family therapy. But I got interested in 9/11 back in 2002 because I had a local friend who kept telling me about it. And I thought he was crazy at first, you know, like we all go through that process. But then I started looking into it. I read Ahmed Nafiz's book, The War on Freedom. And then I started reading some of David Ray Griffin's books. And then I had some serious questions. I mean, I said, there's really a lot of doubts here about what the government is telling us. And then I went to the Toronto International hearing in 2004 on 9/11, and that's when I really, just decided, this is totally, we've been totally lied to. And, I bought some materials there and got to talk to other people in the movement. And so from then on, I was very interested in it, and I kept reading all I could. And then in 2007, I hooked up with some people who were planning on doing a conference in New England, and they wanted to do it in Hartford. And so I started working with them, and we put on a conference in 2007, and I think the title of it was 9/11, something with experts speak out in it. Family members, first responders, and experts speak out. That's what it was. And we did it at St. Joseph College here in Hartford. And from that, I got a radio interview on the Mike DeRosa's show, New Focus, and about the conference. And then that led into me getting my own radio show. So for the last 6 years, I've done 9/11 Wake Up Call at the University of Hartford. And it also gets aired at Wesleyan University, and a few other people pick it up around the country, and some people even in Eastern Europe.
So how did it lead to you getting the radio show? Were you on and the guy said, hey, you got some interesting stuff here, you should go to the airways with it on a regular basis?
Well, actually, there was a man who had done a radio show on the Kennedy assassination. It was called Assassination Journal, and he had done it for, I think, 34 years. And he actually passed away that fall when we were doing our conference. And so they were looking for someone to fill his time slot. And so he thought 9/11 would be really appropriate to put in there. And so that's kind of how the opening came up, and it all happened sort of at the same time. So it just fell together that way.
That's interesting. So you kind of came in just sort of as 9/11, even though people haven't forgotten about JFK, obviously, but 9/11 has kind of taken the front burner for obvious reasons in our modern day, since our entire present is being affected by.
Yeah, well, then that George Michael Ivica, who was doing this show on the Kennedy assassination, was on to 9/11 too, and he had been telling the people at the radio station that they needed to focus on this more. And he was, thinking about doing shows on it himself. And early on, like 3 weeks after the event, he was onto it, I'm told, by other people. So, yeah, so it was sort of a natural progression or transition.
So your show is called 9/11 Wake Up Call. Can you describe what it's about, what you cover on that show?
Yeah, well, I originally started out, in 2008, and covering the things that the corporate media isn't telling us about 9/11, what the 9/11 Truth Movement, all the, information. I've done a lot on the 9/11 Commission early on, the family members. I try and give people information about all the websites, movies, that they can see to learn more, the books that are coming out. I've interviewed David Ray Griffin several times. Kevin Ryan, Richard Gage. I've also had on Paul Craig Roberts several times, and various other people, in the movement. Peter Janney, who wrote the book Mary's Mosaic, related to the Kennedy assassination. I've had on. So anything connected sort of to the shadow government that we have. And I find as I go on, I watch my shows are posted on radioforall.net, and I see what people are downloading. And if I just do simple shows now about facts about 9/11, my following must be people who are more hardcore than that, and they don't get as many downloads. But if I do something that extends it to the bigger picture, like with the Ukraine, Syria, Libya, civil liberties, people are really interested in that connection and the broader issues. So I sort of have broadened it a little bit now.
So 9/11 is sort of the epicenter of the topics that you cover on the show. Because, again, everything that is going on now is really connected to it. It became the justification for this out-of-control foreign policy that we have now, and, of course, the domestic policy with the loss of civil liberties. So basically you branch out.
Yeah, I mean, 9/11 was clearly the pivotal event in our time, the defining event in our time. And the power elite have probably always had an agenda to increase their power and financial interests. But 9/11 was, I think, very planned, and it gave them the event they needed to just push their agenda forward so quickly in all different aspects of our lives. And, if you want to stop any of that, 9/11, I believe, is the shortest route to getting us back to some kind of sane government and policies.
Now, your show is on university radio. Can you describe kind of what that is? Is this like a public access station, or is it, is it just run through the university? Who gets to listen to your show? How far does it reach?
Well, it's on the main, where I produce the show is the University of Hartford. It's www.org is the website. And it has quite a big radius in the greater Hartford area. I'm not sure how many people listen, but it's quite a few. And it's a non-commercial radio station, supported by the University of Hartford in terms of they give us the space to rent, and but we do all our fundraising is through fund drives. It's listener supported. And it costs us about $100,000 a year to run the station, and we get all of that from the listeners. And the university, as I said, provides us with heat, like electricity, that kind of thing, and the space. And have been very supportive over the years. Although I did hear that they did question my show at one point, but my station manager has been very supportive, and so it's I've been pretty much been left alone to do whatever I want and say whatever I want, which is really phenomenal.
Now, I was just going to ask you about that. What kind of feedback have you gotten on the show? It sounds like your station manager is very supportive of at least your right to free speech and your right to bring your message to the airwaves. What kind of other feedback have you gotten about the content of what you cover?
Well, I can tell I get some supporters and some non-supporters within the radio station itself, because we run the gamut of the political spectrum of people who are on the show and their interests and that sort of thing. But overall, I have a lot of support there, and as I said, the station manager is very supportive, and he's he kind of supports the subject and what I'm doing, but he also said even if he didn't, it's we're there to present alternative views, and he supports that no matter what, if he agrees or disagrees. So, he's got a really good attitude about it. But overall, we've done events there that the university has sponsored, and, we did the Building 7 conference we did there, Remember Building 7 a few years ago. And, we sold tickets through the university box office for it, and, got their, endorsements on the website. Not endorsements, but, they advertised it for us and everything. So it's been pretty great. It's really amazing to me sometimes when I think about that.
Well, it sounds like the atmosphere is very supportive of your message, because I know there's a lot of stuff that does come out of Hartford, Connecticut. I didn't know you were attached to all of that until I met you not too long ago. So congratulations for all the work you've done. And it sounds like the Hartford, Connecticut area is more supportive to 9/11 truth, or at least the important aspects of it, like the university culture. And so do you think that has had a large hand in you being able to get this kind of material on the airwaves? How supportive are university radio stations, just based on what you know? And you may not be able to speak for other universities, but how supportive are other university airwaves in letting people get this kind of message out?
Well, I only have experience with 2 radio stations here in Connecticut that I can speak for, but I would say that my predecessor, George Michael Ivica, who did the Assassination Journal, kind of set the stage for perhaps unacceptable conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it. And I think people see the university radio stations, the college radio stations, as alternative and sometimes maybe doing peculiar things, they might think. So they give it a little more freedom than they would if you were a commercial station. But I do have to say that we have a large group of people, a 9/11 Truth group here. So I want to say that it's not just me who's doing all of this. There's a great deal of people who are active when we do things, and they're wonderful. It's just great to be connected with all of them. But so going back to the radio station, though. I don't know. I have to say that early on I got less support, and I think after people actually listened to the show and heard the science and what we were talking about, then they kind of got it, and there's been much more openness to it. Because I find when I talk to people, and I found this again in New York when we were there this past weekend, that people really don't know what we're all about. They have gotten so much propaganda from the corporate media that they have these really crazy ideas about what we stand for, and they don't realize that we're backed up by this mountains of evidence and scientific fact, and they just don't get it. So when you give them the information, then they turn around. They say, "Wow, there's something to this." So I have to say that it kind of built on itself. Having someone have the courage to let us do the show, and then once people hear the information, it kind of speaks for itself. I don't know. Did that answer that question? I don't know.
Well, it does to the extent that that you can answer, because obviously every place is different. I think it might be based on the culture of where the university is located. What I'd like people to do listening to this is I'd like them to be inspired to create their own 9/11 truth-focused shows, or at least alternative news-focused shows, and pretty much copycat what you're doing, what I'm doing, and make it like a little franchise throughout the country.
Yeah.
I mean, not centrally controlled, obviously, but have people talking about these issues using whatever airwaves they can grab for it. And so I'd like to know how easy is it to do something like this? I mean, what do people have to do if they want to have their own show and have it broadcast on university airwaves or public access airwaves like you're doing?
Well, I don't think, getting a radio show may not be as easy as, but there are some really good things people can do with their cable access TV stations, because the cable access stations have to play. If you give them a 9/11 video and you live in their town, my understanding is that they have to air it. Now, they may do it at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m., but, they have to air it, and often they archive them so that if people aren't watching that at 2 a.m., they can still watch it, by going to the archive shows. And I also do a local cable access TV show with Mike DeRosa, and I think that's been very effective too. And we have in the area, like when I started the show, there wasn't much, but now people have popped up doing other cable access shows, or there were some actually in Hartford before I even started doing my radio show. So I think that helps if every community has somebody there putting on movies, 9/11 movies or something on their local cable access, or you can even do your local cable access show, which we do, and it's not that difficult. You just have to be a little bit prepared, but you can go in and talk for 3 minutes and then show a movie or a clip from YouTube on 9/11. And it's very effective. People need to, and I think the public now is really primed. They're questioning the whole NSA spying. They get that we've been lied to. The whole financial thing they know that we're being lied to about and being manipulated. So they're open, and if you can just reach them in a way with some facts. And so being on like the cable access shows, I think, is really, really great, and they have the visuals there. Now, you can also do, I guess, a podcast kind of like what you're doing, right? And put that on the internet where people can watch it. So that's effective too. And if you have a radio station that has, you might get familiar with them, get to know them, donate to them when they do fundraisers, offer to answer the phones. Because when time does open up, a slot opens up for a show, then you may have a shot at it. I have to say, doing the radio show for me, I pre-record it all. It takes me a good 8 hours a week to do a show. So, it's a time commitment that not everybody might have, but it's really rewarding, and you feel like you're doing something rather than sitting here watching everything collapse around you, So I would say to everyone, be active. Do whatever you can. Stand out on a street corner and hand out flyers that you can get off of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. But do something.
Right, it's important to be active in your community, and not even just with 9/11, but know the people who are running things where you are. When I say running things, I mean local business leaders, local political leaders, and know them and be good friends with them if at all possible, so that at least they're on your side on a personal basis, even if at first they may be skeptical to the information you're bringing, may not want to face it. If they like you personally, they'll be more open to giving you an ear and being an audience for you, and possibly entertaining the idea, especially if you just stick to the science initially, because again, the science really can't be argued with. I mean, the other side tries to, but they fail miserably, and that gets people thinking. And I say this, and I need to do a better job here of getting the shows out in a downloadable fashion. But if anybody wants to take this show and put it on local public access or local college stations, I mean, you have my permission. I don't really care. You can't re-edit it to change what we're saying and do little tricks like that. But what you can do is you can use pieces of it or use the whole thing and distribute it if you don't have time, like Cheryl here, for 8 hours a week for putting together a show. You can grab it and put it up wherever you want. So that's other options available to you. We're going to be making those shows available. Now let's talk about what we did this week. You were there for almost the full week. I was there for the last day of it on Saturday, but 9/11 Truth's been in the news. Well, we'll talk about CNN in just a minute after where we describe what was done. But can you talk about what AE 9/11 Truth was doing in New York this week at the site of the 9/11 Memorial?
Sure, yeah. I actually got there on Friday. I was there Friday and Saturday. But they started on Wednesday when the museum opened, standing on the corner of Greenwich and Liberty Street, handing out brochures that had the alternative information with the website for architects and engineers on it and talking about controlled demolition. So they were handing that out to people for those 5 days. And I found that my experience being there on Friday and Saturday was that a lot of people are really open to it. And I actually think, I didn't see the CNN piece, but I heard all about it. And I understand Fox News did something also to kind of bash us. But I think they helped us in the long run because, people are down there going to the museum, so they're open to 9/11. They're thinking about it. And then, you hand them these brochures with the alternative stuff, which they've all kind of heard a little bit about, and I think CNN planted that in their head even more. And they're curious. So they were taking, we gave out thousands of brochures and had a lot of good conversations. And so I think that CNN piece helped us. I don't think it hurt us. And I also think having the museum there now is really a gift in some ways, because if we can put people down there every week, even if it's just not all day on Saturday, which I hope they'll do, you can reach a lot of people with this alternative information. And as I said, their minds are open to it. They're primed for it. They're thinking about 9/11, and I think it's ideal.
Right, and it's funny because there were so many people I saw holding our brochures. I broke away for about a half hour, 45 minutes to go walk around the pools where the two towers were, the towers 1 and 2, and it's a magnificent site. It's actually a really great memorial when you just look past all the lies associated with 9/11 and just look at it for the people that died that day. It's a great memorial to those people. But everywhere I looked, I saw people holding our flyers, because I could see on the back of it had the ad about the Rethink 9/11 campaign, and so I could see that orange sign and know that was ours, and I thought that was just amazing. I mean, a lot of times people handing out flyers, because there were people handing out flyers about other topics too down there, or maybe even things not related to 9/11. I hardly saw anyone holding their stuff, but they were holding ours, mainly because it was so similar to the 9/11 memorial. So people were stopping and looking at them, and you could see the looks on their faces, and it wasn't looks projecting anger or closed-mindedness. It was looks showing open-mindedness. It was looks showing genuine interest in the topics being covered. And I was talking to firefighters, and when you just stick to the science, the firefighters will agree that it should be investigated. And right there is where we need to have them, is that even if they don't want to let their minds go as far as thinking it's a false flag operation, if they just agree that the story doesn't make any sense, that these concerns are valid and that they do need to be addressed, that's really where we need the public to be on that first step towards getting justice for the victims and getting a real investigation into what really happened to those buildings in New York that day. So, great job to all the people that volunteered. What kind of reactions? Did you have any interactions with people? Any stories that you could tell from this experience?
Yeah, I had some really wonderful interactions. My favorite was these two guys were walking by, and I gave them the brochure, and they said, "Oh yeah, we know all about this." And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Tell me about that." And they said, "Well, we're from Sweden." They said, "Everybody in Sweden gets this. We all know that this was an inside job or whatever they said. I can't remember their exact terms." And so I said to them, I said, "Do you mind being on my radio show and talking about that?" So I brought my tape recorder with me, so I recorded them, and they said no, they'd be happy to. So that'll be airing on my radio show soon. But so that was kind of interesting. They said, we're in Sweden, we get it. Most Swedes do. And then I had an interesting conversation with another woman who, and this is what I mean, where people don't really get what we're all about. Because one woman said to me, "Oh, you're not saying that Obama did. You're not blaming 9/11 on Obama, are you?" And I would say, "Well, he wasn't in office at the time." She goes, "I know, but they're blaming everything on Obama." So I thought that was just kind of, an interesting look at things from her perspective. And so, we had a good conversation. I let her know that I don't think Obama is doing any better than the Bushes. I don't think it makes any difference. And I mentioned a little bit about a shadow government. But she kind of was hanging on to her Obama stuff. But anyway, she took our brochure and was happy that we weren't blaming him for doing it. So that was interesting. And then there was another woman who said to me, well, you're not saying that 9/11 didn't happen, are you? So, there's kind of all these crazy beliefs out there. And I said, well, no, it clearly happened. I said, but, it's how it happened is where we differ, and we need a new investigation. So she agreed with that. So, it's helpful to have these conversations with people because I think you can sort of clarify some of their misconceptions about us and what we're doing and what we're wanting. So, and the facts. So those are some of the interesting ones. And I found people from different countries, because down there's people from all over the world walking by, that they were much more receptive to it than some of the Americans were, and that may have to do with the different media openness they have in their countries. So yeah, some interesting experiences, and I enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed talking to the people, and a lot of people walked by and said, "Yeah, we know all about it. Thanks for being here." I had a lot of that. I don't know if you experienced that, but.
Well, I had some very open-minded people. I ended up giving the 2-minute lecture to an entire tour group because they had people from the memorial, tour guides, walking around. I positioned myself in front of this sculpted mural that's on the side of a building right next to the memorial down there, and I was handing out the flyers, and people would walk by, and there was an entire tour group coming by. I tried to step out of their way so that I didn't get trampled by them as they're coming through, but I was handing out the flyers, and the tour guide actually stopped and asked, what aren't we being told about 9/11? There's something on the cover that said about 9/11 reality story you're not being told. So I gave the 2-minute lecture about Building 7, all the free fall of the building, and I talked about the molten metal at Ground Zero, and I simply just said, we need a new investigation, and the people were very receptive to it. Actually, the entire tour group cleaned me out of the flyers that I was holding as they came through. So it was a great experience. And again, I found if you keep the message positive, I think that's one of the biggest problems is that the consequences of the evidence is a real kind of negative message. I mean, in the sense that, oh my God, there's more to 9/11 than what we know. The media is lying to us. The government's lying to us. What do we do? I think if we can make it more positive, which I think it can be more positive because we're doing something about it. The fact that Americans are standing up shows how strong our country is, and just understand the people we're trying to reach out to. Understand that we were all there ourselves at one point, and you're asking people to acknowledge that that their government is lying to them, that their father figure is not on their side, their projected father figure, that the media has worked so hard to create and sculpt in our minds as the protector of our nation, instead of just being flawed people who have the same fallacies that most people have. You're asking them to accept the law, and if you just understand that and approach them slowly with just the scientific evidence, usually once they awaken to that, they're going to go down their own rabbit hole and wake up on their own pace. So I felt it was a very positive experience, and the memorial, like I said, was a very fitting and wonderful memorial. Did you have a chance to actually look at the memorial, the pool?
I didn't. I was really, really enjoying passing out the flyers and felt like that was a really good thing we were doing. So I kept doing that, and plus it was so crowded that people were telling me that they had to wait 2 hours in line to get a ticket to get inside. So, but I definitely want to go to it, and I'll just make another trip down someday to do it when it's, a couple months down the road when it's maybe not so crazy as the grand opening is. But speaking of sort of inspiring and uplifting experiences, you probably met, I don't maybe want to use her name, but there was a woman there from another city who has just gotten into 9/11 in September of 2013. She's never been involved in the 9/11 Truth Movement before that, and she kind of learned on her own, and she's done her research, and she was so moved by it all that she came up, and she'd been there since Wednesday passing out flyers, so it's never too late to learn about it and to get excited and to do something. So I thought that was really inspiring for me to see her there and talk to her. I don't know if you had
right, better late than never.
Yeah, and she's now, we're been doing it for a while, and she brings this whole fresh new perspective and energy, and so it was really great to see her there.
Now, we talked about the media response, and you talked about CNN, and they're horrible. I mean, when I say horrible, I don't mean in the sense like, oh, look how much they've hurt us, they're so horrible. I mean, just they're a horrible, pathetic attempt at trying to attack us, because when they act like this, when they act with the phony outrage and just the personal attacks and saying, oh, there's no evidence, without citing anything to refute it, the American people are a lot smarter than that. The American people can see right through that. And that is part of what helped to wake me up, is just the media's over-the-top overreaction to anyone who's asking simple questions. So they're shooting themselves in the foot as a result of their pathetic attempts to attack us. What should be 9/11 Truth's response to those kinds of attacks? How should we respond? Is it better to ignore it? Should it be addressed head-on, in your opinion?
I agree with you. First, that what you said, that I think they look like clowns, and it's very transparent. I mean, you can just see that, and I do think that the American people see through that, and it's almost insulting, or it is insulting. In terms of how to respond to it, I don't know. I think it helps us rather than hurts us in a way. So, maybe I remember Rachel Maddow did a rant about us a few months ago, and I was almost embarrassed for her. It was so awful. So, and what they did too is, I think, some people were following her and liked her, and then when she did that, I think she lost a lot of people's, a lot of her followers, because she kind of exposed her true self. So I don't know that we need to respond in any way other than, perhaps on like the blogs and stuff to put out, to show what they're doing and point out that they don't put any evidence out there, and that kind of thing. But I think that they do themselves in. I think they do a good job of making themselves look foolish. I don't think we have to do anything, really.
Right, and when you stick to your instincts and you just follow them and you stick to what you know and you tell the truth, you really don't need any kind of strategic planning. Things just sort of fall into place for you. When the other side has nothing but emotional responses and diatribes, attacking you personally, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. It's kind of like that Beatles song, Let It Be. There will be an answer, and maybe you won't even have to produce it. Maybe you got to wait a few years for the answer to come, but eventually justice will come, because that's just the nature of evil.
Yeah,
and I'm not trying to call people evil, but I'm trying to, I think that a lot of them are misled and have their own personal demons that leads them into selling the agendas of the corporate networks and the empire that we're fighting against. But what they're serving is evil, because it hurts the greater good when they don't allow a discussion of these types of topics. They just spend their entire time attacking it.
Yeah, I know. I agree with what you're saying. I think truth rises to the top, and when you have truth on your side, and even though we don't know the full truth, we definitely have some scientific facts that refute the official story, and they have nothing. All they have is a pack of lies, and you can't really, how do you debate or have a story about that when it's based on nothing? So it falls apart on them, and I think that's what we see happening. But I do think one thing that we need to do to counteract them is to just keep giving people the truth, because keep putting out the facts, the scientific evidence, because people are confused, as I can see when I talk to certain people who watch those, who don't get any alternative information. They just watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC or all those. They don't know what's going on. They're confused. So I think we just need to keep putting out what we know and keep putting out the facts and making it more available to them. And that's why it would be really great if people in your listening audience could do the cable access shows, put up the 9/11 videos there, do their own shows, flyer their neighborhoods, get posters and things, or the postcards from 9/11, AE 9/11 Truth, and put them out there, because there are a lot of people who are really confused, and they don't know what we're all about. And when they see that we're about this fact-based, organization, and when they see all of the discrepancies and lies in the official story, once they're pointed out to them, then they get it, and then they when they see CNN making fools of themselves, they kind of get it at a deeper level. So I think that's our way to respond, is to just keep doing what we're doing. And if you're not doing anything, get out there and do something, because the longer we wait, it's been almost 13 years now. When it gets to be 20 years, I don't know what kind of impact people forget or move on. I'm hoping that's not the case. And certainly our foreign policy is still based on 9/11. So I don't see it going away anytime soon. But the sooner we act, the better.
Now, it's Memorial Day on the day that we're recording this interview, even though it'll air on Thursday afterwards. Today it's Monday. I'd like to get your thoughts on 9/11 and Memorial Day. You offer some really great commentary. I want to know, in terms of all the soldiers who have fallen in the post 9/11 wars, why is 9/11 so important in your view?
Well, I do want to say, if I really appreciate soldiers and people who are willing to go and put their life on the line, just to defend our country when we're truly being attacked. And I think some people who went to Iraq and Afghanistan really believed they were defending our country and had good intentions. They just didn't know that they were being lied to, and that the Iraq war is based on lies, and the Afghani war is based on lies. So I kind of, in a way, I feel bad for them. And anyway, so I just do want to say that I do honor people who are willing to do that if we have a genuine threat. I just don't think we had a genuine threat. It's all been manufactured to, move forward an agenda of world hegemony. But and I'm sorry, what was the rest of your question?
Why is it so important with regard? There's probably a million different audience members that have their own answers to this, because it's a very obvious question, but I want your take. Why is it so important exposing 9/11 in terms of Memorial Day, soldiers' loss, war in general?
Yeah, well, 9/11 is a false flag operation, and we're attacking countries that had nothing to do with it. We're killing innocent people, and we're killing our own soldiers based on a lie. And we wouldn't be having to memorialize all these soldiers if we didn't have these false wars we're going to. And so I just hope that people wake up to that. And the more soldiers or potential soldiers who get this, that they're being lied to and manipulated to support, an agenda of our shadow government, sort of maybe even a corporate agenda, that they won't even volunteer to go to war. They'll get it and they'll refuse. And there's all these organizations like Veterans for Peace that have popped up, or Iraqi Vets Against the War, because they finally do understand that they're being used. And so, I also, I want to say, again, I appreciate soldiers who are willing to go and give up their life for our country and to defend us all if it's actually we're being threatened by somebody and we need to do it. But we're not, we're not in these cases, and we know, those of us who have studied 9/11 truth, we know that. So it's almost, in a way, the government is almost in a way mocking these people by having a Memorial Day to honor them for fighting in a war that they've been lied to about and manipulated to take part in.
Now, what would you have to say to all the politicians? You like to think that these elected officials are looking out for us, looking out for the soldiers, and, as has been documented on C-SPAN throughout the year, whenever most of them, not all of them, some have given some good responses, but most of these congressmen have been asked about Building 7. They either react with this contrived outrage, or they feign not knowing about the topic, even though they've been in discussion with constituents about it in the years previous. What would you have to say to these political leaders about the importance of dropping this whole phony show of ignorance and outrage and actually addressing this topic head on?
Well, I've given up hope on Congress, I have to say. Somehow, I don't think, no matter what kind of a person you are when you head down to Washington, somehow it corrupts them, or I don't know the pressure they're under, but they lose any sense of why they're there, and it becomes, how do I get reelected? How do I preserve myself here? Rather than what can I do for the people? And I'm not sure, maybe they're getting some serious threats. I don't really know, but my local congressman, we have gone to his office. We've given him information. We've given him videos. They've gotten, when people have gone to Congress like David Ray Griffin and given out his books to them, they know all about it. And then I've gone to some of his town meetings where he's speaking to the public, and I've brought up 9/11, and he stands there and he acts like he's never heard of it before, says, oh, well, I don't have any evidence about that, I don't know. And I know he does, so I just have given up on them. They are so phony, and I don't know what to say about that. I really don't. I mean, the few congressmen who would do anything about it, or congresspeople like Cynthia McKinney, get driven out of office. So I'm not sure. I've given up hope on them. It is so corrupt, and I think the financial system, in terms of getting reelected, they're dependent on those corporate powers, et cetera, that they're hopeless. And I think we need a whole lot of fresh new people to go to Congress who are there to do to work for the people. And if you don't get reelected, okay, you don't get reelected, but those 2 years you're there, or those 6 years you're there as a senator, you do what you can to make the country better, to help the people. And if the powers that be then, find a way to get rid of you, well, at least you've done something right while you were there. But if you compromise yourself and just to keep yourself in Congress, and you're only making yourself better, or the corporate world better, or the military-industrial complex better, then you're part of the problem. And so I don't know. I feel very hopeless about them, and so I don't know. I don't think I can add any more to the conversation about that. I do want to say to people, if you're listening, don't vote for these guys. Don't vote at all, or vote for a third-party candidate, or run yourself. Especially on the local level, but. And learn all you can about the issues so that you can keep confronting them. I think it's good to keep confronting them, but I'm not really hopeful about them. So, but they do need votes. So if you can pressure them in any way that way, I guess give it a try. But I would let them know. My thing now is I call them and I say, I'm not voting for you ever again if you don't do this, this, and this. If you don't support this. So if they had enough people doing that on an issue, then you might see something change.
Right, and look what happened with the war in Syria, or the proposed war in Syria, the bombing campaign that they wanted to do a year ago. People stood up, the people called Congress in droves, there was protest outside the White House, and Obama was forced to back down. So people think that they don't have power. They absolutely have power. I know that when you write a letter to a congressman, now they may not actually read it themselves, and the staffers may not read the details of it, but they will take note of how many people they have on a certain side of an issue. And they'll keep a tally of that or some kind of record of that, so that for their numbers, for their stats, so they can better advise the congressman. And that's what I learned in activism, the 3-day activism seminar I went to through Campaign for Liberty once, is where they just went over how to reach out to Congress and basically promote their issue, but this could work for any kind of issue, a lot of these techniques. So absolutely they're listening to you. Even if they don't want to or don't want to hear your issue, they still have to take note, especially when you have lots of people voicing the same opinion on something. You were going to say something?
Yeah, in some sense I agree with what you're saying. I'm not saying don't call them. I think people should call and let them know how they feel and let them know where the public's at. But I don't think it's that effective. In the Iraq War, lead up to that, we had 15 million people on the streets worldwide, opposing the war. In America, the results were, the polls show people were against the war. There was, demonstrations, huge demonstrations. They didn't care. They still went ahead with it. And I really think the reason they didn't do Syria is not because of people, although that may have been a small part of it, but it's because in England the folks voted against it. And so that we didn't want to go it alone. And also, my understanding is that Obama got a visit from a general who was telling him not to do it, and I don't know what the reasons were, but there may have been something where the military was saying no to him, that they weren't going to do it, or were whatever. So I'm not sure that we were all that effective in pushing for that, but because if you look at even the net neutrality bill, they got thousands and thousands of calls against that, and they still went ahead with it. So I think there were bigger forces than us behind him not going into Syria.
Well, that's still a representation of people stepping up to government, even if it's not just the citizens, but it's also the military, and that's a testament to the great public education that has gone on over the years. I mean, back in 2003, nobody even heard of this. I don't even think. I mean, there may have been a 9/11 truth movement, but really nobody knew about it except for the people that were in it or slightly interested in these kinds of topics to begin with. However, now everybody's at least heard about Building 7. I'd be as bold to say that everybody's heard about it and knows there's a controversy about the way that it went down, even if they're not thinking about it all the time. And just on the bigger picture, they've watched the destruction of this country over the past decade and the lies of the Iraq War, them not finding the weapons of mass destruction, the destruction of our civil liberties, the whole issues with Edward Snowden and the NSA, Edward Snowden leaking all that information. So the mindset has changed, and it's changed in a very rapid rate over time because of all the public education, not just with 9/11 truth, but with everything else that branches off from it. And so that is why it's always important to speak out and do whatever you can and just create as much resistance as you can in your own small way, if that's the only way that you can do it.
Right, I agree with you on that. And even, the generals that were talking to Obama about Syria may have said, well, look, the American people are behind us on this, so they may have gotten some more courage to talk to him or say no. So yeah, you never know how all that works. So definitely you have to keep the pressure up and make your voice heard in any way you can. Yeah.
Now, at the presentation that Richard Gage gave on Saturday night, there was a question and answer session. There was a 9/11 victim's family member there, a woman who lost her son. He was 37 when he died in one of the towers that day. And there's a video of it up on YouTube. Somebody posted of this woman asking the question. And essentially she was invited up to talk for a few minutes. What was your impression of that? I mean, what were you feeling as you heard that, and what did you come away with?
Oh, I was actually, got tears in my eyes. I felt very sad for her, and she was very genuine and wanted to know. She said she didn't want to die without knowing who killed her son, how that all happened. And she said from very early on she, questioned the official story. So, and I know that, part of what the government and the media uses against us is to say that the family members, it's insulting to the family members, or we're disrespecting them by doing what we're doing. And she was there to say, no, you're not. We appreciate what you're doing, and we want to know. And there was another man there, Vance Green, whose sister was in the towers and managed to escape, but then she died a few years later with cancer. And we don't know if that was connected to being exposed to the dust or what. But he was there, and he said, no, we family members want to know. When they're telling you you're being disrespectful, you're not. So and actually, I would imagine listening to the media lying about it is more disrespectful than listening to us demanding, a new investigation and wanting to get at the truth. So she was very moving to me, and I really, my heart went out to her. I felt very sorry for her. And she clearly was, yeah, she was clearly, still living in a lot of pain from that.
Well, I can't imagine having to lose a loved one, especially in that type of way. You have a kid and you raise him, and he grows up to be 37 and have kids of his own, and it's almost like your legacy is being taken from you, in a certain sense, like a biological legacy. I don't have kids, but that's what I imagine the feeling would be like, even deeper, probably in the detached way that I'm stating it now. But there's obviously a mother losing her child. No matter how many years have passed, it has to be devastating. Now, before we end, as we run out of time, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with? Any last words for this interview?
Yeah, I just want to really encourage people to do something, to get active, to educate themselves, and know that when you're watching the corporate media that you're being lied to, that it is propaganda, and share that with as many people as you can, and find alternative sources like your show and other shows and the online websites, et cetera, and then get the word out. Do what they can. Pass out movies, put them on your cable access, as we talked about. But that's the key. That's the key, is to educate our fellow citizens. And it's happening. It's growing. It just needs to grow faster.
Cheryl Curtis, thanks for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Andy, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download the show by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.